Welcome back, PetaPixel viewers. It's Jordan Drake, and I'm going to be comparing the recently released Sony ZV-E10 to the also recently released Panasonic S9. What's the better buy? Okay, so just over a week ago on this very YouTube channel, we released our initial impressions of the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II, and in that I called it just excellent value for the dollar. But if we go back a little further, a month or so, Panasonic had us in Japan for the S9 launch, and right in the title of that video, we called it baffling. So the main thread that I saw with all the comments in the ZV-E10 Mark II video is, Jordan, you're being inconsistent here. I mean, these both have a lot of very similar limitations. Where is your opinion coming from? So today I'm going to justify that. We're going to do a rundown in a bunch of different categories, comparing these two cameras to explain where my thought process comes from. So keep watching and you might find out what's the better creator camera for you. Wait, what? I hear you saying creator camera? Aren't these supposed to be vlogging cameras? Well, that's a phrase I'm actually trying to avoid using right now because I really feel like traditional vlogging, where you're walking around with the camera pointed at your face, has kind of fallen out of style in the last few years. I really look at these kind of less expensive hybrid mirrorless cameras more as creator cameras, where they're going to offer you a little more creative freedom than your phone does and better production value, and most importantly flexibility. So if you actually want to go do traditional vlogging, stop watching this, just go get yourself a DJI Pocket 3. But if you're looking for something to give you improved quality and a little bit more flexibility, these two cameras might be the right choice, so let's find out which one's right for you. All right, let's kick things off with handling and interface. And I've long been a fan of using Panasonic cameras for their design, their interface when you're recording video, but the S9 actually marks a pretty big departure. For starters, there's no grip on this camera. It looks really pretty, but I find it very hard to hold on to. Actually, when we tested this camera, they gave all the reviewers an optional small rig grip to make it a little easier to hang on to, and I consider that an absolute necessity. I don't mind the one dial on top of the body, but the dial on the back is absolutely one of the most fiddly that I've ever used. It's incredibly annoying. The interface, though, is basically unchanged from higher-end Lumix bodies. Now, that's great in that it gives you a bunch of really professional features. You're getting things like shutter angles, waveforms, open gate recording, anamorphic D-squeeze. My big concern is there's no approachable interface for people who are just getting starting. I think they're going to find a lot of this incredibly intimidating. Let's jump over to the Sony, which has an actual grip that I like quite a bit. It's deeper than it was before, and if you're using small lenses, I find it extremely comfortable to hold on to. That said, if you use larger professional lenses, you might not find there's much room for your fingies to breathe. That can be a bit of a problem. But what I do like here is, if you're in auto mode, you've got a very intuitive touchscreen interface that's going to let you customize the look of your video a little bit without learning a lot of technical jargon. And they actually have custom buttons, like a background defocus button right on the camera body that's going to get you experimenting with depth of field. It does have a fiddly back dial, but not as bad as what we saw in the S9. That said, unfortunately, Sony doesn't offer all the professional assist tools that we see in the Panasonic, but for the intended audience of these cameras, I think the Sony is a much easier experience for beginners to grasp. Literally. It's a big one, and it's a tricky one. Let's talk image quality. Now, because of its larger full-frame sensor, the S9 is going to have an advantage in terms of low-light performance and dynamic range, as well as it has a few profiles I love. The V-Log is my favorite log profile. I really like the Leica 709 if I don't want to grade the image, but this is an old, outdated sensor, and that means the rolling shutter issues are quite severe with it. As well, if you're recording 4K 60p footage, then it has to jump into a 1.5 times APS-C crop. Not only is this inconvenient, but it's going to degrade your low light performance and your overall image sharpness. I mean, while I'm talking about APS-C, the Sony has a much smaller but much more modern APS-C sensor. That means we're getting no crop, recording 4K up to 30 frames per second, but if you jump over to 60 frames, it's just a small 1.1 times crop, and it's still oversampled, so you're still getting very detailed image in this mode. You do get Sony's S-Log3, which is a good profile, though not my favorite, and if you don't want to do grading, you have the S-Cinetone, which, as long as you don't overexpose it, actually looks really nice as well. If you're primarily shooting 4K 60p, I think the Sony is a no-brainer, the way to go, but in the majority of recording situations, the larger sensor on the S9 pays dividends, so I'm going to give it a slight edge in terms of image quality. Next up, one of the most important categories for me, and that is audio, and an area where Panasonic absolutely drops the ball here. I mean, I guess I have to give them credit. There's a 3.5mm mic jack on this thing with a decent preamp, but no way to actually monitor that. No headphone jack in it, and if you do want to use an adapter on the USB-C port like what Fujifilm does, no, that's not going to work either. There's no way to actually monitor your audio. As well, if you look on the top of the camera, it has a shoe, but there's no electrical contacts there. That means you can't use the outstanding XLR adapters that Panasonic makes, so you can't plug high-end professional microphones in without an adapter. If audio is important, Panasonic will really let you down. Jumping over to the Sony again, we've got a microphone jack with a good preamp. The all-important headphone jack is right here, and if you look on top of the camera, look at all those contact points. That's because you can plug all of Sony's XLR adapters or different hot shoe-based microphones right onto this camera. It's going to work just fine. And the built-in mic is quite good as well. It's got a 3-capsule system where it can record different directions all around the body, and right in the box it comes with a really dopey looking but pretty effective windscreen. The only thing I can criticize on this is when you're actually rolling, the audio levels are quite small in the frame and it doesn't indicate when they might be clipping, but I mean, that is a small complaint. Sony absolutely mops the floor with Panasonic here, just like scrubs it out. Oh, this is pretty. Chris has assured me that this is some real Days of Heaven type going on here. So let me know in the comments, do you think that this actually looks as good as, you know, one of the best looking movies ever made? Anyways, I'm going to use this nice frame to talk about battery life, and the Panasonic is using the now venerable BLK22 battery that we're still seeing in most of the new G and S series bodies, and it's not bad. I mean, I find on average I'm getting just over an hour of actual record time with the S9, which just means if you're going out on a full day's shoot, you're going to want a couple batteries with you. But the Sony uses my beloved FZ100 battery, which has just become famous for being very compact but giving outstanding battery life, and that's still the case with the ZV-E10 too. Here we're getting generally just over 2 hours of record time with this in a similar size battery. I mean, the Sony is the clear winner in this case.
Wait, where are you going? Oh, I'm gonna do a Westcott ad. Just sit there and look pretty. All right. So we got a really hot sunny day today, and I want Jordan in the grass here all nice and pretty in a tight shot, but you can see the light's really harsh. I mean, look at my face. It's probably hard shadows, tons of, yeah, gross? Yeah, I look gross. But he looks beautiful, right? So we've got the Westcott fast flag system set up. Right now we're using the 8th diffuser panel, and just look how even it is on his face there. The fast flag kit's actually really nice. You get a bag that comes with it. Jordan's sitting on it right now, so he's not getting eaten by ants and sitting in thorns. Now in that bag, you also get 2 frames. It's very light, it's very portable. That's why we love the Westcott fast flag system. And that's also why Westcott is PetaPixel's preferred lighting partner.
All right, let's talk about stabilization next. And Panasonic has had, I would say, class-leading stabilization for quite a few years now. And what's really impressive is with the S9, you have all the advantages you see in the higher-end S-series bodies. So that means you've got the outstanding boost mode for holding the camera perfectly static. It looks like it's on a tripod. I do think the name is weird. They should call it static mode or something less confusing. But if you're moving with the camera as well, it does a great job of taking the bounce out of it. Now, you can, if you want, apply additional digital stabilization that'll give you incredibly smooth looking footage, but it does incur a bit of a crop. The thing is, I rarely find that I need to rely on that digital stabilization. A few years ago, Sony ruffled a lot of feathers with their decision to release the ZV-E10 without image stabilization, and they're holding firm and true to that with the Mark II version. So even if you're using a lens with stabilization, if you don't activate additional digital stabilization, you're going to find the frame is very, very bouncy. And if you're shooting like we do at slower shutter speeds, even with the digital stabilization enabled, you're going to find the frame moves around less, but you're getting these odd blurry frames. It almost looks like the autofocus is off, but the entire frame is blurry. It looks terrible. You can certainly crank up your shutter speed or use faster frame rates if you want to mitigate that effect, but that is definitely going to change the look of your footage. So basically, the Sony always looks a little unnatural if you're moving the camera, and for that reason, Panasonic is the clear winner for stabilization. Okay, let's talk about lens options next. And the Panasonic has a big full-frame L-mount, and that gives you access to Panasonic's video-optimized lenses, as well as just some outstanding but fairly photocentric lenses from Sigma. There's a few other companies too, but that's mainly where you're going to be pulling from. My biggest concern with the S9 is it seems like no one told Panasonic's lens engineers there was a small body coming, because they kitted it with this 26mm f8 pancake that's manual focus, fixed aperture. It's kind of garbage. Or you can get it with a 20-60 that's a nice kit lens, but honestly it looks huge on this body. That's not to say there aren't some small lenses in L-mount. Sigma makes some lovely little contemporary lenses, but they're pretty expensive and again, a little bit more photocentric. Sony, on the other hand, does have a pretty appropriate little 16-50 kit lens available for only $100 more. It's not the best optically, but you do get some power zooming, which might be a cool little party trick. But also, Sony has been quietly fleshing out their APS-C line for the last few years. There's a whole bunch of really nice ultra-wide options if you want to offset that APS-C crop, but then third parties are stepping up as well with a bunch of very affordable, very solid performers. If you're looking for a good starting point, I would recommend the Sigma 18-50. It's really cute and very powerful. Simply put, if you're looking for a compact, affordable video package, then there's a lot more to love in Sony land. Video autofocus is next, and the S9 is just the latest of the Panasonic cameras where we're seeing phase detect autofocus in them. And this gets rid of that horrendous contrast detect wobbles that we saw for years on Panasonic bodies. And if you have a single subject, especially if they're well isolated, it does a great job following them around. You can see examples on our podcast every week. I use an S5 II, and it just stays locked on me throughout the recording. The issue is if you've got a more complicated scene with multiple subjects, sometimes the camera gets lost, and it does take a while to reacquire focus if it loses focus on your subject, which can be a real drag. Now, Sony's offering has extremely consistent autofocus, largely because this has the latest Sony Bion's XR processor that gives a performance similar to what we're seeing at Sony's higher end, but unfortunately this doesn't have the AI chip in it that we see with cameras like the more expensive A6700. And I think it's because of that we do see it occasionally just like jump for a second to the background or to the foreground. The good news is it reacquires focus incredibly quickly, but this is still quite jarring. One thing if you're a creator is this has the product showcase, and that's gonna lock focus on a face until anything is held up to the camera, then jump over there. If this is the kind of presenting that you do on your YouTube channel or TikTok, this is a very useful autofocusing feature. So just based on the audience of these cameras, I'm going to give the autofocus edge to the Sony here. All right, time to talk dollar bills. So when it comes to price, the Panasonic is more expensive, $1,500 for the body only. You could get it with the terrible pancake manual focus f8 kit lens for $1,600. I don't recommend that. Or you can get it with the actually quite good 20 to 60 millimeter kit lens for $1,800. But looking at the ZV-E10 II body, it can be had for only $1,000, or you can get it with the, okay, uninspiring, but pretty compact and power zooming 16 to 50 kit lens on that. I mean, simply put, you're gonna get up and shooting for a lot less money with the Sony. All right, so we've covered a lot of categories here, and you can see the Sony certainly did win more of them. And the big reason I think the ZV-E10 II is such good value for the dollar really comes down to what it's competitive with. There's not a lot of good video-centric options around that $1,000 price range, where once you get up to $1,500, you've got some really compelling cameras there. Like for a couple $100 more, you could look at a Panasonic S5 II. For a little bit less, you could get a Fujifilm XS20. These are great full-featured video cameras without a lot of the limitations that we see in the S9. So I stand firmly by my statement that the Sony is great value for the dollar, and the S9 kind of occupies a weird middle ground where I find it hard to recommend to a lot of videographers. All right, well, hopefully I have defended myself successfully, and much more importantly than that, hopefully this helps you decide what's the better content creation camera for you. If you like our bull, you should definitely check out the PetaPixel podcast. We drop it every week right here on YouTube, or you can just go to your favorite podcasting app and search for the PetaPixel podcast to find it. And if you want to show your love and support for Chris and I, go to store.petapixel.com, where we have all of our merch with like 8-bit versions of ourselves and, you know, Chris with some Chinese under it. I don't know what's going on with all of that. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. We will see you all again soon with more on PetaPixel.
Great job, Jordan. You did great. The light was beautiful on you. Let's go back. I'm going to take the
No,
flag
give me
away.
my... No! Oh, it's terrible. Bring back my Westcott fast flag.